There was no way to foresee it, and there was no way to stop it.
Yeah, how do you put that many people in a space and you don't kind of ruin the land?
The billowing white sort of prow of the ship coming toward you, and it got hotter and hotter.
I think mostly there was just for me at least, there was a pretty overwhelming sense of dread.
It was pandemonium.
The outsiders that came here, I was just totally shocked. I mean, they were young kids there. My God, they sat there and pissed their pants. I mean, they were so drugged up. I couldn't believe it.
And there was alcohol involved, but we was probably even more drugged because they had, I know, the sex and the dope. I guess the sex was about as rapid as you could get. And
I was more upset that he had to make that statement.
And I think the words are still in my frontal lobe today. It's the first time, last time experience. Done.
Rebellion, drugs, and rock and roll. Those all characterized the 1970s, and those all created chaos that crippled what turned out to be a short-lived outdoor concert scene in Bowling Green. During the 1970s, Bowling Green State University was a popular venue for bands touring the Midwest. For example, during the last week of April in 1975, the band Jefferson Starship performed at the Anderson Arena. But even before Starship's performance, the idea of another type of concert, a large outdoor concert, at BGSU was explored. Outdoor concerts were something new at the time. Success was unproven, and the format was uncertain. In January 1975, the student group Cultural Boost started talking about an outdoor concert at Doint Perry Stadium.
Well, it's never been done, and I think a lot of it had to do with the two things kind of working hand in hand. We've been able to do small sets and sell out crowds and students participating in the smaller arenas, and that one just, I think, came out of that part of Eddie's desire and my desire to make something of it, to make something noteworthy for Bowling Green to have.
Leading up to it, I don't think that anybody really saw much wrong with it. I don't really know what Hollis Moore was thinking at that time, because I never really talked to him about it prior to the concert. I did afterwards, of course. But prior to the concert, I think that he thought that this was going to be a pretty good thing. The athletic department assured him that it would work out okay, and so I don't think there's any great concern on his part about this.
But I'd have to tell you that there was some spirited debate about that, the wisdom of it. And I clearly remembered Hollis Moore saying, I'm not really keen about this whole idea, and have some really overall misgivings about it, and that, okay, if you feel that you can keep things under control and so forth and it won't get out of hand, then let's give it a try.
Hollis Moore was the president at Bowling Green State University in 1975. Dick Young was the athletic director. The interests of Cultural Boost and the athletic department would come together because the athletic department had a financial need and saw holding the concert as a fundraising opportunity.
And at that time we found out we were $44,000 in debt, which was enough to show that we had a concern. And the idea of having the rock concert was a way to break that problem we had and to make enough money to get us out of debt. And we had the facility. The stadium would be able to be a super home for a rock concert.
So with the support of President Moore and the athletic department, the planning began for an outdoor concert. When he was an undergraduate, Jake Way was the president of the organization.
The premise for Cultural Boost was essentially to bring in acts of maybe pre-emergence or going to be or would maybe possibly be a big name group or whatever. When I started out, we brought in Hall & Oates, and we did that at the Union with 3,000 people there. It sold it out. It also brought in George Carlin, put him in Anderson Arena, and it sold out with that. And then we had Captain and Tennille, and that was more of a cultural thing from the standpoint that they were a new group at that time. So a cultural boost in itself obviously was to make sure that you brought in names that big enough that wasn't expensive or too expensive, and highlight the university.
The first step was to hire a promoter. Cultural Boost had connections with Ross Todd Productions. Ross Todd was an up-and-coming promoter in Southwest Ohio.
Because my reputation was doing college concerts, and that's why I was there. And once you screw over a college, the word spreads pretty quickly. In those days, there was an entertainment group, organization called the National Entertainment Conference, which Bowling Green was a member of. And all I would have had to do is go to one convention and have Bowling Green University make the announcement that my company didn't pay their rent. And that would have screwed me over real big. And so that would have never occurred under my watch. The university got every dime, I'm sure, that they had coming.
At the end of April 1975, Todd and BGSU signed a contract to bring the event to Bowling Green. About a month later, the bands were announced.
I had nothing to do with the actual bands participating. That was all promoter, Ross Todd. But working with Ross throughout the months planning that, it worked. We worked well together in convincing the university that, all things would be great, as far as moving ahead with the concert.
Johnny Winter, Golden Earring, Montrose, Pure Prairie League, Styx, Richie Havens, the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band, and the Outlaws would perform. The music of these bands would populate rock radio throughout the decade. The concert would be called the Poe Ditch Music Festival, a name created by Todd. Todd quickly spread the word of the concert. The Poe Ditch Festival was advertised in 6 states, and tickets were sold from Chicago to New York City.
Yeah, we bought advertising in virtually every radio station that we were buying advertising on to promote the event. We were now buying advertising and get public service announcements that the show is sold out. And all of our ticket outlets, when people came in, were also notified to tell wannabe ticket buyers that, sorry, sold out, the whole event is sold out. And that prevented what we felt would have been 10,000 or so people showing up at the gate looking to buy a ticket.
People started arriving in Bowling Green 1 week before the show.
Some of the people we talked to come from some pretty faraway places, and they were, which most people would say, the hippie variety of the way they dressed and acted.
And with the large crowds came problems. One of those problems was a lack of security at the concert. Todd contracted a company from Toledo to have officers at the concert.
I know that the night before, the security team from Toledo was supposed to be there. And if I'm correct, I may not be correct with it, but it might have been Pinkerton. And I believe that we were supposed to have 100 or 150 dressed officers there.
But in reality, only a handful of officers showed up. So Jake Way recruited about 30 of his fraternity brothers to work as security.
I didn't anticipate, I don't think anybody else did. Maybe they did, I just didn't as a student, as a coordinator of the event. I didn't anticipate the influx of the crowd the night before. There were over 10,000 people or more camping out. And they were on the big hill, they were on the golf course, they were everywhere. And of course, the local security, obviously the campus security, had their hands full, and with Bowling Green Police Department had their hands full.
Well, I think everybody was overwhelmed because they didn't anticipate it. I've heard everything from 35,000 to 45,000. I don't think anybody has a clue the actual amount of people that was there, but a lot more than they ever expected.
But fewer students than expected were among the crowd. Less than 4,000 student tickets were sold before the show. Early on Sunday, June 1st, 1975, the crowd filled the Deutsch Perry Stadium for the Poe Ditch Music Festival.
And I can remember looking out from the stadium at I-70, and I could see nothing but miles and miles and miles of stopped vehicles on I-75. And but they managed to get everybody in, and I would say their estimates at the high end were 44,000. I would agree with that as an approximate number.
I remember it being really hot and crowded. So I was always on the field. I never was in the stands. And it was just from the front of the stage to the back where the other goal post was just packed with people. It was almost impossible to move through because it was just, they were packed in there. I'd been to other big festivals, and I don't know if they had kept better control of the number of people they let in, but this one just seemed really crowded.
The official attendance never was known, but what happened in the crowd never was forgotten.
My recollection again was that there was 1,000 or so people standing outside where the ticket box offices were, where people could walk in normally and buy a ticket for a football game, I would assume, or whatever activity was going on in there. And they were congregated out there, and they were throwing bottles over the top of the chain link fence, and it was starting to look rather ugly. And how many of those 1,000 or 1,500 kids that were standing out there were students is anybody's guess. I would hope that the students wouldn't have conducted themselves like some of those people were, throwing bottles over the fence and shaking the fence and acting like they're going to push through it.
It did seem like a lot of people were drunk. I mean, there were plenty of people doing drugs, but it seemed like there was a lot of drinking. And then, which, you know, back then, those crowds didn't really mix the drinkers and the drug users.
And there was alcohol involved, but it was probably more drugs because they had, I know the fire department took people out of there, overdoses to the hospitals, and I don't know how many or anything like that, but I think the sex and the dope, I guess the sex was about as rapid as you could get.
Ash was a lieutenant in the Bowling Green Police Department at the time. He said police collected several dozen bags of marijuana and some white tablets, possibly LSD. Still, police kept arrests to a minimum. As for the concert, Pure Prairie League was the opening band to play.
And I understand there were 30-some thousand people in attendance at this festival, which was just a wonderful festival. I wasn't a big festival goer, but I certainly enjoyed myself at it.
If you were in a certain direction from the amps on stage, from the speakers, you could hardly hear anything, and it also seems to me that there was a lot of cutting out, you know, where the amps just, they'd be singing and there'd be a little static and then you couldn't hear them.
Perhaps it was an omen. 6 of the 8 acts performed with everything running smoothly and everyone having a good time. But by late afternoon, the sky started to change.
It was those big, deep thunder clouds that are really dark gray along the bottom. I can remember this. And then the billowing white sort of prow of the ship coming toward you, and it got hotter and hotter like it does right before there's going to be a bad storm. It was really, really humid, and because it had been hot all day, but it had been sunny and hot.
We found out, the promoter and myself and everybody else found out about 15 minutes before the storm had hit, because it was hit at Toledo first, and it was coming our way.
And then a storm came up out of nowhere, and it was fierce. We stayed, we were on the field in Deutsch Perry Stadium, football stadium, and we got up and picked up our blanket and our stuff and got out of there because the rain just didn't seem to be abating. It wasn't going to be a short storm. And, but we ran like most of the other people. I understand about 5,000 people braved the rain, and I understand you could look at the records, but I think it was a couple, 3 inches. It fell in maybe an hour. It was really a downpour. And those 5,000 people or so had withstood this and didn't want to be denied, and they wanted to see the last 2 acts. But by that time, all the bands had cleared out. The threat of electrical storms on their equipment was apparently a real one. And
all the wires were underwater. And groups, Johnny Winter and their managers said no. The ones that played, you know, Styx, Montrose, Pure Prairie League, they enjoyed the crowd immensely. That's all they could talk about. They were psyched, they were pumped, they were playing the shows, playing the show, and they were reacting to the crowd. The crowd was having a great time. The music couldn't have been a better cross, a mix of music, I felt. And just the students, everybody was there, and I say students, but there were a lot of non-students that were there, but just the crowd, you could tell that vibe, that energy, that they were enjoying themselves. And that, I felt, is why I thought a success. It was a success.
Winter left without taking the stage, and Golden Earring followed, effectively canceling the last 2 acts and ending the show. That left the people who stayed through the rain angry. Bottles were thrown and damage was done to the field, including the burning of the track and field press box.
And the biggest problem we had was the grass football field, because with that number of people walking around and treading on that destructive things, whether it was a piece of metal, a lot of it was a broken glass, was to get that picked up, which we thought we had taken care of. As it turned out, during the next winter, the frost heave, or what we would describe as a frost heave, brought that the glass back up again, which was an extremely scary thing, because you'd have players having their faces or other parts of their body pretty much lacerated. And I think we finally got it all up, but it was, again, another extensive group of folks that just combed that field to be sure and get the grass up, to be sure we were safe to continue to use that wonderful facility that we had.
And we had some little rakes, like leaf rakes, you know, and we just kind of try to bring it up a little bit, you know, and then we just had to pick it up by hand.
About 30 people helped with the cleanup. It took several days.
The thing that we remembered and was easy was that your beer can collectors, because collecting beer cans at that time was a big item, and I think we had beer can collectors from about 6 neighboring states that came in, and all the cans went.
But what remained were the memories of an historic outdoor concert in Bowling Green.
This was probably one of the most pleasant shows, other than the unruly small amount of kids outside that one fence. This thing went off without a hitch. Everybody enjoyed it. The sound system was good. The staging was perfect. You know, it was just going off without a hitch. The bands were enjoying it. In fact, most bands that played initially, most of them would get up and leave after they're done. They were enjoying the whole scene so much that they stayed around. A great time was being had by all, and had it not rained, I guarantee you we would have been back there year in and year out.
But it financially was a success. The promoters made money, the school made money, the bands enjoyed themselves. It was first class.
And I think even today they'd be reluctant to, looking back then, think about it today, I think, because there's a lot of memories.
No, it was just a wonderful event, and it was, I hope you find other people who were still there. I mean, it's 40 years ago, and I didn't have this hair then, and I didn't have this beard then, and I didn't have the 40 years that I have now. But I think everybody that was there had a good time.
But it's simply not a topic that I would ever take up again with Dick Young and reflect on it and so forth and say, well, if you had to do it over again, would you do it? Because I know the answer, no. And it's been a little painful chapter for some of us in that history, and it's a period of reflection that brings back some bad memories.
After the concert, President Moore made a definitive statement that has held true for 40 years.
And the gathering the next morning, and the first thing we had to do, and I worked with President Moore on, and that's developing a statement for the news media and for the public. And I always recall writing and drafting for him, and I think the words are still in my frontal lobe today. It was a first time, last time experience. Done. No more.
But one fact remains.
My roommates always kind of would kid me, even today. They said that they would read this in the Blade or the article in the Sentinel or whatever, a large article about and then Kim Jakeway at the end said everything would have been fine if it hadn't rained. That was my whole, one line there, but it was actually true. Had it not, it would have been going, there would have been no problem. I'm assured that there'd be no problems whatsoever. Everybody would have left happy. Rick Derringer was there, Eddie Irwiner was there with his brother, so it would have been a big surprise. That whole event itself, in looking back at it, like I said, I don't have any regrets other than the disappointment it may have caused the administration, but I would love to see something with the stadium. I know it's difficult to pre-plan, but now that they've had the event and they could see, obviously, from what had happened, they could, maybe produce something or have somebody produce something upscale, a little more upscale. This was the 70s. Nobody anticipated anything quite like that, and these were shows that were in demand. They were just, to have it at Bowling Green was incredible.
Everybody falls at a given moment. Making blood boil red, the color that your skin is glowing. No, you could have been better, could have been a trendsetter. Sweating from the heat, 103 degrees, wearing a sweater. Couldn't think of a lot that would be a lot worse. Mess up for 40 minutes, that's 40 years in a hearse. That's what music is, mistakes along the way. And with every word I say, that's another foot in the grave. Could right the wrong, no such luck. Doors closed, whether you turn your back or suck up. And that sucks, huh? Yeah, I know the ache. You put so much into it, but that's the price that you pay. Is it too much? That's what I asked. Robbed of my chances without a mask. What could have been, but that's all over. Wasted chances while I'm still sober.